Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then planning for your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's sellable and then help you to exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. In building a sellable business, a key value driver is a next level, what we would refer to as a next level management team, a management team that can take your business to the next level of growth. And deciding on the right plans to put in place to incentivize those key employees to grow the company, as well as stay with the company, requires careful and thoughtful planning and expertise. A very common question that business owners face in doing that is when and if to award equity in their business to these key employees who are instrumental in building the value of the business. For startups with an established goal of exit within a period of time, say it's a tech startup or software or something like that, a GovCon, whatever, where they have a goal of exit within 5 to 7 years, they're going to sell to a third party. A key strategy could indeed be awarding equity or options for equity at launch. But for other small businesses, the decision may not be so easy. And so that's our topic today. My employees want equity. What should I do? Our guest, Paul Younkins, is a founding principal of TriBridge Partners here in the Washington, D.C. area. And Paul has over 20 years of experience helping business owners answer this question and others like it pertaining to health and employee benefits, executive benefits, and talent engagement. Paul, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you today.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Pat. Good to see you, Walter. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Paul, great to see you again. I'll go ahead and start us off. So, this is an area that is oftentimes kind of an entryway into client engagement for me and Pat. And I like to get, what's your first impression? Because my first impression usually when a client says, hey, I'm thinking of offering, my key employee equity. My first thought is usually, let's see if we can find another way to make them happy without doing that. I don't know, maybe that's just too negative. What's your initial thought?
Well, I think that it's a learned reaction, Walter, because probably like me, many times when someone has come to you with that strategy in mind, they may not have thought about a variety of different ways of getting to the same objective. So I do sometimes have that reaction as well. I also have a reaction where it's, that's pretty thoughtful, and there's a lot of ways to consider these things, and I'm glad to know that that's certainly something you're contemplating. But where the conversation normally goes from there is sort of what Pat mentioned earlier. What is your goal? Personally, what is your goal professionally? Do you know yet? Life changes, seasons change. You look out 5 years, you might think you want to sell to a third party, and suddenly your EBITDA is at a certain point, and you're taking enough home where it starts to not maybe be, and maybe you're loving what you do, and maybe you don't. So things can change, but one of the questions that I'll ask, I'm sure you all ask, is it's just, well, how did you arrive at that conclusion? And as Pat sort of started off the podcast with, sometimes they'll say, well, the person brought it to me, and so great, we've got an enterprising, maybe an entrepreneurial person that's thinking, along these lines. But is that because they think that's the only path to success for them? I've been in conversations before where, the rising stars wanted to become a partner. They wanted to become a principal. And when we really sort of peeled back the layer of the onion on why, we got a variety of different answers, and some of them might make you chuckle, but, we got, I really want to have that on my card. It helps me with business development. We got, I really want to participate in the profits. I really want to have influence at this firm. I feel like I've got a lot to contribute. I'd like to influence at the top level. I'd like to maybe receive some sort of a payout in the event of a transaction. What they don't oftentimes say is, I'd like to be taxed on unrealized income, and I'd like to sign my name on the collateralization of a 10-year lease, right? So not that that's always hand in hand with equity awards, but the point is that, there's a lot of ways of arriving at, okay, so if all we need to do is put your name on a card with the name principal beside it, maybe we do, maybe we don't, but good to know that that's your driver, right? So anyways, maybe a long-winded answer to your question, but my reaction is similar to yours, and because I don't always know the origins of the request.
Right.
Yeah. So then let's review, if you will, or describe if indeed the right decision is equity. What are the options for that? It would be either a gift of equity, actual equity, bonusing it, and or selling it to the employees, and that can either be done directly or through options. And so, what are the considerations for the owner when? What are some good questions that we can leave listeners with today as to give serious consideration to as to whether or not that they should go down that route versus one of the other routes that we'll lob out here in a couple of minutes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to stay away from the tax components here, because I think that would be more of a, Walter's wheelhouse and his team to weigh in on, and you're definitely going to want to have those considerations. What is the structure of your corporation and the implications to you, and the various tax preservation strategies that might be out there. One question, here's several to think about. Is this an incentive or is this a benefit? Is one important question. They can get confused sometimes, and those are my terms. They don't have to be someone else's terms, but the way I kind of think about that is, are we rewarding performance, or is this sort of a retention strategy part of comp? Or is it a combination of the two? And so when you're thinking about, hey, look, we're trying to get from point A to point B here, and I've got this great leadership team with me to help me get there. Do I want to create an incentive that then results in something, or do I just want to give it away no matter what? And there's no wrong answer to that, but it's sort of preferential to the owners and sort of considerate of the overall timing of the business strategy. We've had plenty of situations where it's, if the company does this well, you get this. If the company does this well and you do this well, then you get this. And we have other ones where I just had a conversation, it must have been 3 weeks ago, with someone that said, I just want my folks to stay around for a long time. I've got the right people. And in 10 years, I want to give each of them $500,000. Okay. So, we talked through that a little bit, but that was their, now what vehicles to use to get there, kinds of, there's a lot of different ones to choose from. The next thing I think that is important is to consider is the program truly meaningful to each participant? We've got, so much appropriate awareness and sensitivity to the diverse workforce, whether that's multi-generational, multi-persuasion, multi-interest. And as a result of that, if you've got 5 different people that are in that leadership or rising stars role or have those roles with you, they might have different, motivators. We recently did a design for someone where the initial discussion had to do with phantom stock. And while they may still do that, after interviewing each of the potential participants, really to get their perspective as well, because this firm wanted to be inclusive. And I highly recommend that, by the way. I mean, you want to talk to your rising stars about what's inspiring to them. What we found was that several were really interested, they were working for their families. They wanted to make sure that in the event something happened to them before a change in control or a deferred compensation sort of vesting, that their family would be taken care of. And so for them, some sort of a life insurance policy was more appropriate. For others, they wanted to have the ability to see that, sort of profit sharing deferred comp solution. They wanted to be able to watch sort of the way they watch their retirement plans. Believe it or not, a couple other ones we had, they were putting in so many hours per week, they weren't taking care of themselves. And the owner decided to provide them with some concierge medical services so they could get access to care more quickly. They had some situations in their lives going on that made them a little more sensitive to the importance of good health. Lastly, time, the stressor of time. And so we found a virtual meaning, I should say remote, professional assistant program that would allow for these particular key people. It wasn't in the budget to give every person their own personal professional PA, but it was in the budget to be able to, or they were able to create a budget to be able to provide a shared assistant that could help with coordinating at-home tasks for the family, emails, calendaring, all over a variety of different things that was able to reduce the level of stress. So just by meeting with people and talking with them, the one size fits all kind of approach didn't necessarily for this particular company and others, a custom strategy was much more appropriate than we're going to give everybody options and hope that that's going to be the driver. Now, certainly in the event of a large, transaction, a lot of things that can be life-changing for a lot of people. So I don't want to diminish the importance of the financial security aspect. The last thing I would say is making sure it's easy to understand and top of mind as often as possible. You'd never want to spend this kind of time and investment and then have folks not understand what it is, how it works, and what it really means to them. Then we've lost the, so keeping it simple.
Yeah. Okay. So, is our goal to incentivize or benefit the employees? And benefits would you say in that category would be more for past performance, Paul, than future performance, or both? Or how can you elaborate a little bit more on the difference between your two categories, your thinking there between benefit and incentivize?
Yeah, I've heard incentive or reward. I've heard incentive or benefit. I've heard different ways of saying it, but really the way I see it is sort of the incentive is you've been given a clear objective, and if you accomplish that objective, then this is what we're going to give you, and if you exceed it by this much, we're going to give you this much. The reward and the benefit sort of approach is more like you did a great job. We're not going to get into metrics here, but we're just going to give you this. And in some ways, it becomes a little bit more of an expectation by the participant as part of their overall comp plan than if I do this, then I'll get that. So I think that, look, it comes down to the perspective of the participant. Is this something I just get by being here? I should pretty much be able to expect it. Or is this something that I need to make sure I'm, contributing to be able to receive it?
Yeah, so work that we're doing, Walter and I, when this comes up, of course, and it always does, we're more focused on the incentivize piece, I think, because we're talking to them about building the value of the business, the sellable value, and so that can maximize their options for exit. And so we talk about incenting either growth and or retention. We rarely, I don't know that we talk too much about benefit, the benefit piece. You have any thoughts about any of that, Walter?
No, I think that's right. But, I wanted to ask Paul a question pertaining to situation you and I are currently working with. And I thought you had a really great suggestion during our last meeting, but I asked Paul about this. So, Paul, we have a situation where a client's done a really nice job of building up her business. Let's just say let's just say the revenue base right now is 5 million. She wants to drive it to 25 million. And she's hired some people who she thinks can, help her get there. She liked the idea of, and Pat mentioned this, we were talking about phantom stock, but then Pat threw out the idea of stock appreciation rights because she kind of felt like, I want to be fair with them, but at the same time, I took a lot of risk to get this first 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to help me grow from here. And that's what I believe they should share in.
Mm-hmm.
And stock appreciation rights seem to be a good way to do that, but I almost never see a client with a stock appreciation plan. Do you?
Not often. And I don't want to be too stereotypical, but I think that sometimes that's because they're not getting advice on the various ways in which they can provide equity and ownership. They just assume it's part of the whole thing. And then when they go and they talk to their attorney, if they don't have a good attorney that's asking them the right kinds of questions, the attorney is going to take the order and basically put it in place, or so might the CPA, behave that way versus, well, let's talk about this for a second. But 100%, if you've put in this much time, and what we find is a lot of times when you talk to the participant, they don't feel as though they deserve, or that if you really ask them, they're basically just going to say, I just want to be able to participate in what I contributed to.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, if you're going to think about rewarding existing ownership in the work that's been done for the past 10 years, then, oftentimes there should be a buy-in, and people don't always have the liquid to be able to want to be liquid cash available to buy in. So then you start doing income reductions, you start playing games with their income to be able to make that all happen. I absolutely think that if you've got a goal of getting here, and these are the people that are going to get you there, and you want them to participate in it, and you want to do it with equity. You don't want to do it. There's a lot of other ways to do it. Profit sharing, bonuses at the transaction. I mean, doesn't have, you can do those things. But yeah, to answer your more specific question, I don't see as much of, you used appreciation rights. There's other, methods, but I don't see as much of that as I should.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah, because that's one thing we had talked about was like a bonus at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say a company sells for 1 times revenue, and let's say they do get to 25 million. We would say, okay, well, we would take the 5 million off that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of similar to the stock appreciation rights, I guess. But there's lots of ways to do it for sure.
but the philosophy is, should they be participating in the work that's already been done or in what's happening? And I'm really glad you asked the question. It doesn't get asked often enough.
Yeah, so, well, that's what we do here, Paul. We ask brilliant questions that don't
I know. I should be
get asked
surprised.
very often. That's what we do, right, Walter? That's why all the listeners tune in. One of the reasons. Yeah, so then regarding equity, I think a lot of times too, and you hit on this earlier, Paul, employees ask for equity without really understanding all the implications of actually owning, or if they were really interviewed the way you just described, and a program was custom built with meaning, considering their specific wants and needs, they may find that equity might be the last thing they want. Right? I mean, I'm right about that.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of ways to get at that, and oftentimes it's just because of lack of awareness, lack of education in this particular area, ignorance of this particular area, that folks automatically run to this, to this equity term. And hey, look, do it, right? But just do it, after having contemplated all your options, because, like I said, depending on the structure of your enterprise, it can be an uncomfortable discussion, when a person receives a tax bill and, they didn't take any income home.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a key point here, I think, which is, well, the key takeaway from today's conversation would be, look, it's a major investment to put a robust incentive plan in place. Let's make sure that the goals on both sides of the table are seriously and thoughtfully considered before putting something in place, because the owner's goals need to be thoroughly considered, but so do the employees. And then let's figure out a solution that's going to best accomplish meeting goals on both sides of the table. Too often it seems maybe the owner's goals might be thought through on some level, maybe not as thoroughly as they should be, and a plan's put in place that just makes sense to the owner without thorough consideration of the employees. So that would be a key takeaway, don't you think?
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. Why would you, nothing worse than making that kind of investment of time and capital only to have it fall, on deaf ears, or not to have the returns you're looking for, not to have it be as meaningful as you want it to be.
Right.
Because not everybody thinks like
the employee might start looking around at other employers who have a plan in place that more meets their needs, versus staying on board after you've made this major investment in an incentive plan. That wouldn't be good.
That's exactly right. I mean, not everybody thinks the way the owner thinks, otherwise they might have started their own business. So to assume that they would want what you would want can be dangerous thinking sometimes.
Yeah. So, okay. So in the last number of minutes, let's talk about this. What are some of the common mistakes that you've seen owners make in putting executive benefits or incentive plans in place?
So sometimes they're too rigid. They don't leave a lot of room for flexibility. You don't want to have a promise to an employee or to your key people that is not backed by something more formal. at the same time, you got to leave a little bit of room for, good years and bad years and things like that. So finding that balance between, this is a dependable, credible, incentive or retention strategy that people can understand, and leaving yourself some flexibility so that in the event of a turn of the market or even just some business strategy pivots, you're not, you can authentically, make some changes and still live up to your initial promises. So I think, making sure it's flexible. As I mentioned before, a mistake is that it's not relatable to everyone. And another major mistake is that it's not communicated often enough, clearly enough. And so those are some mistakes. I would say that, and we talked about this, I think, before. Now, this issue existed beforehand, but post-pandemic, with a lot of this conversation around resignation or retention, a mistake that we're seeing happen is a lot of reaction with a focus on fixed costs, meaning comp. So if I'm concerned about whether we're going to lose Joe or Sarah, we need to give them an increase in comp. And, that's a fixed cost now that you can't unwind. It's got an inflation component to it when you think of, COLA and everything else over the years. And you just changed a lifestyle. So making sure that when you think about that person's total compensation structure, especially in these sort of known times of job change, don't make the knee-jerk reaction anything that has a fixed nature to it. Instead, do build out more dynamic bonuses and incentives and things like that, because those are strategies that if next year things change, you're not on the hook for it. And if you're actually planning an exit, your EBITDA is not impacted by the fact that you've just inflated everything. So those are a couple of mistakes that we've seen, as reactionary sort of behavior.
Yeah, that post-pandemic issue that you just raised, we've seen that, of course, haven't we, Walter, with business owners and how they're feeling compelled and almost forced to raise levels of income because of the market, and particularly as it pertains to their younger employees who seem to be in such big demand in whatever industry they're in. And it just seems like the market, all boats have risen in regard to salary. And so what would you say, or what do you say to an employer who said, yeah, okay, I hear you, but boy, these millennials and these younger people, they can get more money over here right now. We need to get back comparable. And they do. We might call it a knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes it absolutely is. But sometimes it does feel like, gosh, yeah, that's the market currently, and what do they do about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, so my reaction, because we get that question a lot, there's several responses. The first one is maybe you always have been low, so maybe you should think about a compensation benchmark being done. And so we all know experts that do that, and you can have somebody do an analysis to determine, hey, pandemic, no pandemic, great resignation, no great resignation, you've still been underpaying, based upon benchmarks. You should be aware of that. So certainly maybe apply some science to it. The second thing is, this increase in comp just can serve as a negotiation tool for the next job. So if they're already unhappy, if the person's not engaged, if they're not enjoying what they do, if there's a variety of different reasons for why they're not happy, and you just gave them a $10,000 raise, well, they're just going to negotiate with the new employer with a higher base salary now than they did before. So, don't throwing the money at it isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. People defer, in my opinion, to money when it's the only thing left that's got them motivated to stay. So, if you're paying fairly, and what I would be doing is working on culture. Are these folks engaged? What's the relationship like with their manager? That is the number one reason why people quit is their manager. How do we work on these kinds of things? Are we an intentional organization? When employees feel as though you care, even if you keep failing with your ideas, you know what, they at least they know you're trying. So there's a lot of things that need to be done there. And the last thing I would say is when it does come to money, if somebody's making $80,000 a year and you say, someone says we should give them a 10% increase. Okay, so $8,000. Well, what if rather than giving them an $8,000 increase in base comp, we tell them, look, you've been doing a great job this year. We're going to give you a bonus each quarter of $2,000, okay, which ultimately reaches $8,000, and it's being provided at a frequency level that isn't like they've got to wait a whole year to get there. So they wake up in the morning, they have, a stomach ache, they go to work, they have a bad morning, and at the same time a job recruiter calls. Well, if they're about to get $2,000 in, 3 weeks, then the next morning when they wake up, they feel better. They might say, you know what, I'm just going to wait. So I just think being strategic about the $8,000, give them the raise if you want to do that. But again, know that there's other ways of getting at this same thing that doesn't suddenly change someone's lifestyle, doesn't change their expectation. It allows you to cash flow your budget, so you didn't spend it all up front. There's a lot of different ways of getting at that.
That's a good point.
That's outstanding. Yeah, and actually very encouraging. We don't work in this area every day the way you do, but those are three things that we brought up to. So it's very encouraging to hear that from you. Yeah. Okay. Well, then here, this has been fantastic. The time's flown by. Is there any last thoughts or advice, pieces of advice, or that you'd pass on before we wrap up here, Paul?
I guess, if you are on listening to this podcast today and you're thinking to yourself, this is relevant to me, then it probably, I would just say, do some thinking about, do you have the right people in the right seats? If you don't know you do or not, ask a third party. Sometimes it's helpful to have a trusted third party do some interviewing to really understand the professional and personal goals of your people. They may not tell you, or they might, depending on the intimacy that you have there. But when you have somebody come in and you ensure, you got to explain to yourself, this person's here to understand what you're trying to accomplish, and they're going to advise me. You're winning with your team there. They see you as caring and concerned and empathetic to what they're trying to accomplish. So I would say, get to know the motivators of your executive team. As you mentioned before, whether you decide to perpetuate internally or externally, a major driver of your value is that all that intellectual capital and all that does not just live with you. It's got to, for a buyer to want to have the legacy, power that you've brought to the table, it may or may not be you that's doing it. So we got to make sure that those teammates have a reason to stay. And if you're going to perpetuate internally, well, then, gosh, is this the right team to transition to? So I just think getting to know them better and making sure you've taken those steps, there's no harm in it. You learn, and they feel as though you care.
Outstanding. Okay, in a second, I'm going to ask you if there's anything that you want to promote today, and then ask you to give your contact information so that listeners can reach out to you if they need to or want to. But listeners, a few just points in summary. When you're thinking about this, is your goal to incentivize or benefit the employees? Be clear on that. Is your program meaningful to the participants, not just you, the owner, but to the participants? Because if it's not, the results, it may just not be what you want the results to be. You may not end up accomplishing your goals if their goals are met. Make it easy to understand, over communicate it. Make sure it's not too rigid, but flexible for you in running your business and managing your business. So if you hit a downtime, you can still, it just needs to be flexible for that reason and other reasons. And in this post-pandemic challenge that many of us are facing in regard to just the labor force, and don't have a knee-jerk reaction to just raising the salaries, but be a little bit more strategic about it, thinking through, have we been too low all along? Are there other reasons that they may not be happy, cultural reasons? Are they happy with their manager? And then should we consider a strategic bonus program versus a raise in salary? So those are some great takeaways. Paul, so is there anything you want to promote today?
Sure. I mean, why not? I mean, but we, I think at the end of the day, whether you're talking about your health and employee benefits program, your executive benefits program, your retirement plan, anything that has to do with what you're putting in front of recruits and existing staff as a reason that they should work there, as a benefit for them working there. We do that. The way we do it differently, in our opinion, is we help you discern whether what you have is a high performing or a low performing plan. And there's a lot of different ways to determine that. What are you paying for it? Are you getting the same value as your peers are? Is your communication a high performing communication strategy or low performing? Are you looking at is it going to be high performing over a longer course of time? We look at things in 3 to 5 year increments versus just annual renewals. And is it relevant and timely? We're seeing a lot of we don't dabble. So there's areas of contract review that we've been doing a lot lately. And gosh, the things that we're finding in disability contracts, group disability and individual disability contracts, where things are excluded that in the small print that, it's too late once somebody, might get disabled, and the same with the health plan, various exclusions, embedded fees that over time, and the retirement plan as well. Are your advisors being paid? How are they being paid? Are the options being benchmarked appropriately? So the paraphrasing of that is, we really want to make sure that what you've got is a high performing plan, and we help you discern what the difference is. Most people don't know the difference between low performing and high performing plans. They just hope they get a good increase and hope that they get responses from their brokers when they call.
Okay, and if a listener wants a review of any of that you just mentioned, or talk to you for any other reason, how can they contact you?
Well, they can email me at paul.younkins, that's YOUNKINS @tribridgepartners.com. They can call me at 301-661-7285. Or if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, we do a lot of posting about this stuff. So look me up there. We do what we call a view from the bridge every week or two on a various topic that we find to be relevant and timely. And so I would encourage listeners to check that out, follow that, follow us there, and hopefully they find something meaningful. But I appreciate the question, Pat.
Outstanding. Well, thanks again for joining us, Paul. Great content. It's going to help listeners, no doubt about it. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit comprehensively, you can reach Walter at 301-951-9090, and you can reach me at 301-859-0860. You can also access resources at exitreadiness.com, grfcpa.com, and nslp.com. Thank you again for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Pat Ennis and Walter Dial signing off.